Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Oh, this one could be a marathon. It's over 3 pages. And this one comes from Classic Arcade and Amusement Park 4242. And this is in response to Yamaha's flagship synths being backwards compatible. Shame about the competition. Video I did in January 2024. And Classic Arcade writes, thank you for the video. Now, regarding making a Kronos VST, Korg has already made VSTs of the MS-20 and the Poly 6 engines, which are on the Kronos. I don't think it would be any kind of challenge for Korg to reproduce a full Kronos VST. After all, it's based on PC hardware. I believe the decision is 100% marketing if they want to offer it or not. The same way Yamaha didn't offer the Montage until recently deciding to do it. Yamaha no doubt eventually realised that they weren't much competition with themselves in offering the latest keyboards as both hardware and software, and as a whole will only profit from it. Sure, there will be a few people that will buy a less expensive software instead of the hardware, but overall the software isn't going to affect sales of the hardware. There will likely be some that will buy the software and later realise they'd like to have it in a hardware format too. I feel the VSTs have often created more demand for retro synths as people become more familiar with the synths like the Mini Moog, the Prophet 5 and the OBX, because they learned from their VST versions. Some of the audience realise they want to own themselves. I'm sure the other reason that Yamaha decided to make the Montage MVST, or ESP as we now know it, was because if they don't, Roland and Korg will beat them out and capture more of the market. And as people become more familiar with one brand and platform, they become more familiar with the hardware offerings too. So a Korg user got to know the Yamaha Montage platform via software would be more likely to buy a Yamaha Montage than before, or Yamaha's future keyboards. With offering the Montage M ESP and Roland offering the Phantom, this puts more pressure on Korg to offer a Kronos VST. And will it be a Kronos VST or a Nautilus VST? Very good question, that one. Anyway, without a doubt, there will be a lot more demand for it. And if they don't offer it, some users will turn to Yamaha and Roland, who will offer their latest flagships as software, and Korg didn't do it. With regarding Windows 11, bought a new laptop a couple of months ago. I have Windows 10 and Windows 11 set up as a dual boot. I'll be installing my VSTs as soon and finding out what may or may not work with Windows 11. But Windows 11 sounds like it may become abandonware the way Windows 8 and Windows ME did. So its compatibility may not be as important except for those who bought a computer with pre-installed Windows 11 and don't have to buy a Windows 10 machine. I bought a used but not too old Dell business grade laptop, similar to my others but much newer. 32 gigs of RAM, 2 terabytes hard drive, durable LCD screen, not one that flexes, and one that has been drop tested like my previous Dell. A similar aged M1 MacBook with 8 megs of RAM and 250 gigs hard drive will still cost between 50% to double what I paid for this. Macs aren't cheap. No doubt not be able to run older VSTs too well, as Apple loves to make things quickly obsolete, so you don't have to buy new devices, so you have to buy new devices and software. I would expect most or almost all 25-year VSTs to still work on the PC under Windows 10, but we'll see. They did it on my older laptops and PC laptops and desktops. Macs include a better GPU for video editing and video rendering than the average PC, but most other stuff a PC offers the most available software, hardware, far better compatibility with the past, because Microsoft values this better than Apple. Far cheaper generally. I learned from my new iPhone how software updates caused 75% of my entire phone software library to be incompatible when they forced 64-bit apps only and eliminated 32-bit software. Was I able to get free updates on most of them? Hell no. Did they come out with new versions of my most favourite programs? Hell no. Maybe half at best, and some functionality so different I no longer know how to use them. And it's like learning how to drive all over again, to do the things I already know how to do. With a PC and Windows, you're not forced into these changes nearly at the same rate as you are on Apple products, because Microsoft realises there is in value in keeping things running and not forcing people to start over fresh without significant reason to do so. My iPhone is far less useful to me than what I could do with an iPhone in the past years. Thanks, Apple. That is really what I call progress. I do agree with a lot of the Apple stuff, though. The whole Catalina debacle was a real debacle, as far as I'm concerned. Which is why I actually have 2 Macintoshes, for that exact reason. Anyway, all I can say is, thanks for there was quite a detailed rationale behind the Korg Kronos VST, and it'll be interesting to see if this is the direction they will go in. They obviously didn't say anything at NAMM, because NAMM focused on, I think there was nine announcements from Korg, and not one of them was a VST about the Kronos. Anyway, as you say, they have already released a number of the legacy engines and retro synths in a VST format, and these are actually engines on the Kronos. And I was told the quality of the Korg releases, especially the Korg M1 VST, was exceptionally good. But to be honest, I've yet to dive into those packages, so I can't really personally comment. Now, it will be interesting to see how many VST users do buy into the hardware platform going forward. But I'm a great example because I just basically love hardware. There was something else I was going to put in here. I didn't actually write in the comment, and it was around about oh yes, it's a computer platform. So the Kronos is a computer. It is a PC at heart, but it's a PC that runs Linux, not a PC that's running Windows. Now, if it was running Windows, you could probably just port the thing and quite easily, but it's running Linux. It runs Linux for a very important reason, in that Windows struggles with the real-time kernel. If you go and look at any industrial control system that needs a real-time kernel, you will not find them using Windows. You will find them using Linux. And there is a reason for that, because the real-time kernel can handle real-time changes, whereas the PC, the way that Windows is written, it doesn't do the same thing. Now, somebody will jump into the comments and give me an exact explanation about this, but it's something I do know because we use Linux real-time kernels at work, and we would never get those systems running on a Windows PC. A lot of periphery to the system runs on Windows, but the engine, the guts of the process do not run on Windows. Anyway, there are many arguments about upgrades and platforms, and you see them all the time. You get, if you go onto YouTube and look, I can probably tell you at the moment in my YouTube splash screen, I've probably got at least 3 videos there about Windows 11 and how brilliant or how rubbish it is, depending on your point of view. It's one of those, it's a clickbaity subject. People type in Windows 11 and they get 25 million hits. But it is a clickbaity subject. Anyway, as I said, I have 2 Macs. And I also have a number of Windows PCs. I've got 2 Windows XP PCs, I've got a Windows 10 PC, and I've got a Windows 98 PC. All for different reasons. But I do sympathise with the compatibility issue. I sympathise with many musicians out there that have perfectly serviceable hardware that has been rendered effectively obsolete by a combination of operating system upgrades and vendor drop-in driver support. Roland, to be one of the ones who jumps out at me like a sore thumb, because I own a fair amount of Roland equipment and some of it is obsolete. I can't use it on my current Mac. I have to use it on my older Mac or one of the PCs that I've got floating around. So I do get that, and over the years a number of musicians have actually contacted me quite irate saying, I've got an X, performed an upgrade and now can't get it to work. And I accept technology has to move on. I do get that, but you're kind of in corporate world. You have a refresh policy. The refresh policy is 5 to 7 years, depending on what it is, and you have to keep your software up to date for all kinds of reasons that I won't go into. But in the personal space, if you've got something that works, you've got something that works. And I'm going to just go off the point here. But my mother is in her 80s, okay, and she still uses her PC every day. And I bought her a new Windows 10 PC a few years back because her Windows 8 PC eventually gave up the ghost. It wouldn't work. So in the end I replaced her Windows. And every time you go through the process with my mother, and she's fairly savvy, she's fairly switched on, but there is still a learning curve for her in order, things are not quite where they used to be and you have to kind of walk her through. This is the same thing. Why are you forcing people to move up versions? It kind of is a money-making scheme, especially on the Apple side of it, because if you want something to work, you've got to move to the latest version. The latest version means you need new hardware, new applications, new software, you've got to download it, new licenses. It's all about money. And that's what it all is, and you need to protect yourself from it. Anyway, Classic Arcade writes back and says, I can say that the Korg VST of the M1 is so good. My 2 original M1s have remained unused for the past several years. I currently have one set up and, to be honest, it's never turned on. When I compare the sounds side by side, they sound identical within any reasonable comparison. I was able to load in my favourite patches into the VST, and it supports SysX. And now this is one of the things that actually has come across with the Korg stuff, is that it does, the Roland stuff as well, but the Korg stuff apparently you can load in all your legacy M1 libraries, and people think this is brilliant. I think it's a great cracking idea. Unfortunately, Korg's Triton's VST does not support SysX. Bad Korg. And I think it's just a step in the wrong direction, but it sounds spot on. And all of Korg's own sound libraries are actually available in the VST. Now, it's for me, as in Classic Arcade, it's great to be able to go to both practice and gigs and not have to transport an M1 to get the sound spot on. I still use the M1 sounds frequently as I know the synth well and what it can do. Unfortunately, my +1 patches are not there because those samples were all based in the ROM, on board a separate board inside the machine, and they weren't made by Korg. Most M1 samples, of course, were made by Korg, and as such they offered the expansion cards, and those are available in the M1 VST. I did have a decent bit of luck of sampling some of the +1 patches, especially those that I couldn't live without. I have several older computers. Microsoft clearly values backwards compatibility a lot more than Apple. I started off with Apple computers in the 80s and Apple II Plus, and in the 90s sold my Apple computers, but I largely disagree with their philosophy. I find out soon enough how my new laptop is running older VSTs, but since I know almost everything worked with Windows 10 on an older PC, I'd hope the same luck on a newer one. I highly doubt a Mac could run much older software. I also run a lot of older software for all kinds of stuff. I see a lot of videos on how people love their Macs more than PCs. But I also realise a lot of video editing software requires a pretty strong GPU to function. Most Macs come with GPU that is better for video editing than the average PC, so they are naturally going to favour Apple, but something else with the computer, and they find a lot of advantage to a Windows ecosystem. IT support has been my speciality. Yeah. Now, what I would say, again, I completely agree with what you said there. Now, thanks for your experience, because you just echo the experience of a number of other people regarding the Korg M1 VST. Now, in terms of the Windows versus Mac debate, you know what? I'm not going to wade in on this, because I can see both sides, and as I've said earlier in this video, I've got a number of machines for a number of purposes, so I know exactly where you're coming from. But there are a few general comments regarding legacy synth utilities that tend to be better supported on the Windows platform. I agree with that as well. Now, I have heard that Windows 11 will see a host of music software elements not work. I think, you know, a regular commentator on the channel is Gary Robinson from the Death Beats, and Gary, his Windows 10 machine failed. He's got a Windows 11 machine, and he has a whole host of stuff that is just not working. But you know, maybe I will see if I can get out of him along. He's given me a list of stuff that doesn't work, but I just need to sort of write it down into a coherent form that I can give it to camera. But the reality is, you know, Windows 11 is going to be one of those step changes, and I think, you know, it's going to drop support for a bunch of stuff, just like Apple did when Apple removed the 32-bit driver support from its kernel. That really caused a lot of pain for a lot of people, and I think Windows is going to go down the same route of dropping 32-bit support very soon, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, most Windows software is 64-bit, but it actually has drivers that support 32-bit drivers. So, and I agree with you. To be honest, music software or editing software, video editing software, and photograph editing software is better on the Mac, in my opinion. And I also find that DAWs, one of the reason I actually swapped to the Mac was because I found, even though I had a very high spec Windows PC, I found that the Windows machine was struggling very soon into a composition, whereas the Mac just seems to take it in its stride. So, you know, it's not as clear cut. I think what you need to do with a PC is you need to work out what you're going to use it for and buy it for that purpose. And you could end up buying many different PCs. And what I've seen, you know, friends of mine, is they have different PCs or different computers loaded with different stuff for different purposes. So that they're not overloading the RAM and the CPU and disk read-write times. I mean, I look at the Muse Receptor all the time, and I still think that it was such a cracking idea. A unit that is just customized for VST reproduction.
you.